You walk into your room, but the silence weighs heavier than your exhaustion. The light from the screen is still on, offering no comfort. It's an accusation. Because deep down, you know that something inside you is still begging for attention. But this isn't something new. It's been there for a long time. It dates back to when you were too young to understand, but old enough to feel. The pain you feel today has no name in the present. Its roots lie in the past. You say you had a normal childhood, that your parents did what they could, that you have nothing to complain about. But I ask you, why then does guilt live inside you? Why do you feel you have to try so hard to be loved? Why has your life become an eternal attempt to deserve something that, in truth, should never have been conditional? Because it wasn't just the shouting that shaped you. It was the silences. It was the looks that said more than words. It was the affection that came as a reward, not as a right. It was the hug that only existed when you did something right. It was the love you learned to earn, not to receive. And then you grew up, and you started repeating it. You started relating to others as if you still needed to prove your worth. You started begging for attention from those who were always absent. You started clinging to people who made you feel exactly how you felt back then, inadequate, invisible, guilty. And when someone walks away, your world falls apart. Not because that person was everything to you, but because they triggered an old pain, the pain of feeling unloved just for existing. The pain of when you learned that you had to try hard not to be forgotten. You think you missed the person who left. But what hurts is not their absence. It's the absence that has always existed, the emptiness that has always been there. What you didn't have when you needed it most. The love you idealized, the presence you dreamed of. You don't miss an ex. You miss the childhood that didn't happen as it should have. And that's why you repeat it. That's why you accept so little. That's why you settle for crumbs. Because there is still a child inside you desperately trying to be seen, to be loved, to be accepted. But it wasn't. And instead of embracing that pain, you silenced it. You buried it. You labeled it overcoming. But make no mistake, what is repressed does not disappear. It manifests itself in uncontrollable jealousy, in fear of abandonment, in excessive attachment, in difficulty saying no, in a tendency to blame yourself for everything. These are all symptoms. And symptoms are the language of what has been silenced. They are the words your unconscious mind finds to scream what you insist on not hearing. I just wanted to be loved without having to try so hard. That's the phrase that echoes inside you every day, even if you don't realize it, even if you disguise it with productivity, jokes, superficial relationships, even if you try to. Convince yourself that everything is fine, because it's not. It's not when you sabotage yourself every time you're about to be happy. It's not when you choose people who reject you. It's not when you repeat patterns that hurt you. All of this is the wounded child that still lives inside you. And as long as they are not heard, you will remain trapped. Because childhood doesn't. And when we grow up, it lives on in our choices, in our affections, in our fears. And if you don't heal you repeat. The childhood you don't consciously remember. Your body remembers. The way you love remembers. Your anxiety remembers. Your guilt, especially, remembers. And that's why you feel like you're never enough. Because one day, someone made you believe that you had to be perfect to be loved. And that became law inside you. You live trying to compensate for a bottomless void. Because what was missing can no longer be given in the same way. But it can be welcomed. It can be reframed. It can be cared for. But that only happens when you stop running away. When you look inside. When you stop blaming the present for pains that come from the past. When you stop repeating, Because repeating is an unconscious way of trying to fix things. But you can't. Fix the past by living the same suffering in the present. What you need is not a new relationship. It's not someone to complete you. What you need is to recognize the child you abandoned inside yourself. The one who learned to swallow their tears. The one who learned to smile so as not to bother. Anyone, the one who grew up too soon. They are still there. And they need you. Not to fix the past, but to finally receive the love they always deserved. The love that requires no effort, that does not come as a reward, that does not depend on performance. The love that simply is, because you are. And until you offer that love to yourself, you will continue to look for it in places where you will never find it, because no one can give you what you refuse to receive. And liberation begins when you stop blaming yourself for not receiving what was never your fault not to have had. When you understand that the mistake was never yours, that the absence was not your responsibility, that the love denied does not speak to your worth. It says about the emotional limitations of those who raised you, and you no longer need to carry that burden. You've carried it long enough. Now it's time to let go, to look inside, to embrace the pain, to break the cycle. Because your childhood still haunts you, but it no longer needs to define you. If this spoke to you, sign up. There are more truths you need to hear. You wake up tired, even after hours of sleep. You feel a tightness in your chest that you can't explain, a sadness that appears for no reason, a constant fear of losing, of being left, of not being enough. And you ask yourself, why am I like this? But that question is wrong, because the right question is not, why am I like this? But when did I learn to be like this? Because no one is born blaming themselves. No one is born believing they have to try hard to be loved. No one is born feeling they have to annul themselves to be accepted. This is learned. This is internalized. This is a reflection of an environment where love was conditional, where affection was scarce, where your existence was not celebrated, it was tolerated. And what happens when a child cannot say what they feel? The body speaks. Anxiety comes as a response to fear that has been silenced. Insomnia is the wakefulness of those who have never felt safe. Compulsion is an attempt to fill the void left by an absent lap. Depression is often the muffled cry of those who have learned that expressing pain is weak. And you learned to smile to hide, to keep quiet to survive, to please so you wouldn't be abandoned. And that learning became a prison, an emotional prison, an affective prison, a physical prison. Because the body records everything, the mind tries to forget. The pain you feel is not new. It is old. It is repeated. It is symbolic. It appears every time you relive a pattern. Every time you accept less than you deserve. Every time you say yes when you want to scream no. Every time you stay out of fear of being left. You think you're in control, but you're reacting. Reacting to the past. Reacting to what you've experienced and never processed. Reacting to an absence that has been normalized, but never healed. And then you enter into relationships where you become the caregiver, where you give everything and receive almost nothing in return, where you try to save the other person, hoping that it will save you too. But this dynamic has a name: traumatic repetition. You are trying to fix with the wrong people the pain that hurt you in childhood. You are unconsciously trying to live a new version of the story, hoping that this time the ending will be different. But it won't be, because it's not about the other person. It never was. It's about you. It's about the part of you that still believes that if you are good enough, you will finally receive the love that never came, but you don't realize it. Because you live on autopilot. Because you're numb. Because you've learned to survive, not to feel. And every time someone gets too close, you sabotage yourself. Because genuine love scares you. Because it's unknown. Because it disrupts the internal logic you've built to protect yourself. So you run away. You shut yourself off. You make up stories. You choose those who don't choose you. And you repeat. And you suffer. And you blame yourself. And you repeat. Again, until the day you decide to stop. And stopping isn't giving up. It's choosing. Choosing to break the cycle. Choosing to listen to what your body is saying. Choosing to look at your history with compassion, not judgment. Because you are. Not weak for feeling. You are not needy for wanting to be loved. You are not too intense. You are just carrying pain that is not only yours. It is transgenerational. It is ancestral. It is echoes of what was experienced by your parents, your grandparents, by a whole line of people who learned to repress, to silence, to endure. And now you are the one carrying it. But you are also the one who can break free. Because healing begins with awareness. And awareness begins when you understand that the problem is not you. It is what you have learned about yourself. It is the distorted image that conditioned. Love has created within you. It is the broken mirror from childhood that still reflects who you believe yourself to be. But you can rebuild that mirror. You can look at yourself with new eyes. You can learn to accept yourself, to listen to yourself, to protect yourself, to say enough to everything that hurts you, to say yes to everything that heals. You no longer need to beg for love. You no longer need to beg for attention. You no longer need to hide so you won't be rejected. Because now ... you can choose. Choose to leave the role of victim in your story. Choose to stop justifying the pain. Choose to be a whole adult, not just in age, but in your psyche. And being a psychic adult means taking responsibility for the child you once were. It means taking care of them. It means listening to their pain. It means saying what no one else said. I see you. I accept you. I love you. And that's when something changes. Because when you accept yourself, the other person no longer has as much power. When you embrace yourself, the lack becomes presence. When you respect yourself, the cycle begins to dissolve. But this journey requires courage. Courage to look inside, to open old wounds, to touch what hurts, to recognize that often we abandon ourselves, waiting for someone to come and rescue us. But no one will, because this is a journey that only you can take. And when you get through it, something inside you is reborn. The wounded child gives way to the whole adult. Guilt gives way to self-love. Fear turns into truth. And then, yes, you begin to truly live, no longer reacting to the past, but building the future. Comment, today I choose myself, and start the decision that was never made for you. You say you're tired, but it's not your body that's exhausted, it's your soul. Because there is a fatigue that cannot be resolved with rest. It is the fatigue of living in conflict with yourself, of repeating patterns that you already understand, but cannot break, of knowing that something is wrong, but not knowing how to get out of it. And this confusion has a source. It comes from a place inside you that is still stuck in the past. Because no matter how much you have grown, matured, studied, evolved, there is a part of you that still lives according to the same emotional script as always, the same need to please, the same fear of losing, the same rush to give yourself away, the same difficulty in prioritizing yourself. And all of this has a root, an invisible but real root, a root called unconscious identification. You were shaped by presences, but mainly by absences. And without realizing it, you identified with those who hurt you. You identified with your mother's silence, your father's judgment, the coldness of your environment. You didn't want to repeat it, but you became a mirror. Because the unconscious does not follow the logic of desire. It follows the logic of repetition. And repeating is an attempt to master trauma, to have control over what once made you feel powerless. That's why you attract the same type of relationship, the same type of partner, the same emotional cycle. Because deep down, you are still trying to resolve what has not been resolved. You now want a different ending to the same story. But this story ... needs to be ended. Because the happy ending is not in repetition. It is in breaking away, but breaking away hurts. Breaking away requires sacrifice. It requires letting go of the idealized image you have created of yourself. It requires accepting that, yes, you were hurt. That, yes, you didn't receive the love you deserved. That, yes, you tried to compensate for it in every way and lost yourself in the process. Because every unloved child becomes a needy adult. And every needy adult becomes a hostage to relationships that hurt, but remind them of what they have experienced. A hostage to emotional dynamics that are bad, but familiar. And the familiar, even if toxic, has a taste of security. Because the new is scary. Because the healthy is strange. Because real love doesn't look like the love you learned. And that's why you run away when you find someone who treats you well. Because, subconsciously, you don't think you deserve it, and you start to sabotage yourself, to doubt, to provoke, to test. You do everything you can to make the person leave, not because you want them to, but because you need to prove, once again, that you are not worthy, that you will be rejected, that you will be abandoned. It's the cycle repeating itself. It's the trauma speaking louder than reason. It's the wounded child taking the wheel of your life. And as long as they are in charge, the destination will always be the same dot. But today, I want to show you a way out. And that way out begins with a confrontation with everything you have avoided feeling. Because you have to feel in order to heal. You have to touch the pain in order to let it go. You have to look at what you have been through with today's eyes, not with the eyes of who you were when you suffered. Because today, you have resources you didn't have before. You have awareness. You have strength. You have a voice. But you are using all of this to continue surviving instead of starting to live. And living requires choice. The choice to stop abandoning yourself. To stop molding yourself to fit into spaces that diminish you. To stop romanticizing relationships that re-traumatize you. Because every time you go back to those who hurt you, you confirm the same belief to your unconscious. I deserve this. And no, you don't deserve it. You deserve love with presence, with respect, with reciprocity. But before you can receive that from someone else, you need to give it to yourself. Because your pattern doesn't change when someone else changes. It changes when you change. When you decide that enough is enough. When you understand that your value isn't in how much you can endure, but in how much you respect yourself. That your strength is not in continuing to try, but in knowing when to go. That your self-love is not selfishness. It is emotional survival. And the hardest part, I know, is recognizing that the love you have sought so hard outside yourself is the same love you have denied yourself. That the attention you begged from others ... is the same attention you have denied yourself. That the care you offer to everyone is the same care you refuse to receive. Because deep down, you still believe you need to be perfect to deserve all of this, but you don't. You just need to be honest with yourself. Stop pretending it doesn't hurt. Stop saying everything is fine when it's not. Stop using spirituality, productivity, and motivational speeches as anesthesia. Pain doesn't go away because you rationalize it. It only transforms when you go through it. And going through pain is an act of courage. It's recognizing that, yes, you're still stuck in old stories, but that now you can write a new one, that now you can choose a new role, no longer that of a victim, but that of the author of your own journey. And that role begins with a decision, the decision to stop. 2. Look back, to recognize the patterns, to embrace the wounds, and to finally say, I won't do it again, because repeating is unconscious. But deciding ... is conscious, and you are ready, even if you still have doubts, even if you still have fears, even if you still feel pain. You say you want to move on, that you're tired of suffering, of repeating, of insisting on those who don't choose you. And I believe you. But I also know that there is something in you that still pulls you back, something invisible, intangible, but as real as the pain you feel when you are rejected again. It's a thread, an emotional thread, a psychic cord that still ties you to what you think you've overcome. And that thread isn't in the present. It's in your unconscious. It's in the promises that weren't kept, in the words that weren't said, in the gestures that never came, and above all, in the hopes you still have that, one day, someone will come back and say, now I see you. But that day never comes, because it doesn't exist. Because you're waiting in the wrong place. What holds you back is not the other person. It's the expectation. It's the fantasy. It's the desire to one day be validated by those who invalidated you, to one day be loved by those who ignored you, to one day be chosen by those who always left you last. And that imprisons you, because it keeps you under the illusion that healing will come from outside. But healing will not come from an apology, from belated recognition, from a love that never knew how to be love. Healing only comes when you understand that it's not going to happen, and that it's okay, that you don't need it anymore to move on, that the closure you expect from the other person, you can give yourself, but it's hard to accept that, because accepting means letting go of the ideal, the dream, the version of the story where everything is resolved with love. But sometimes love doesn't save. Sometimes it hurts, because it was learned in a distorted way, and you became more attached to the pattern than to the truth that you were not loved as you deserved. And that hurts, but denying that pain ... hurts even more, because it keeps you tied down. And as long as you are tied down, no matter how many times you try to break free, you will always return to the same place, because the prison is inside, not outside. It is an internal labyrinth, made of memories, fears, childhood hopes. And you need to realize what you are calling love is neediness. It is projection. It is an attempt to fix the source. But you cannot fix what was by trying to relive it with someone who is still the same. And often you continue to insist on relationships that destroy you, not because you love the person, but because you love the idea of finally being seen, of being recognized, of being important. But the importance you ought to have for the other person, you haven't given yourself yet. You diminish yourself. You omit yourself. You forget yourself. You put yourself off until later. And as long as you do that, you will continue to wait for someone to come and rescue you. But no one will come, because true rescue comes from within. You don't need another chance with someone who has already discarded you. You need a chance with yourself, with your history, with your essence, with your value. Because what was denied back then can only be restored here now by you, not by someone else, not by a reunion, but by a breakup. Breaking up is saying, I accept that it didn't come from where I expected, but I choose not to punish myself for that. It's stopping looking for shelter in places that have always rejected you. It's stopping going back to the same emptiness hoping that this time it will be full. It's saying enough is enough, and the enough you need is not for the other person. It's for yourself, for the part of you that still believes you need to suffer to be loved, that you need to be perfect to deserve affection, that needs to mold itself to fit, that needs to beg for something that, if it were true, would come. Love is not begged for. Affection is not torn away. Presence is not forced. When you have to try too hard to be seen, it's no longer love. It's emotional survival. It's traumatic activation. It's identification with pain, and you don't have to live like this anymore. You don't have to repeat it anymore, because now you are aware, and awareness is power. The power to choose, to break free, to rebuild, to start over. But there's no point in starting over from the same place. You have to break the cycle, the pattern, the internal prison. And that starts with a symbolic act, cutting the cord that ties you to the need to be chosen, the thread that makes you doubt yourself every time someone rejects you, the thread that makes you think that if someone doesn't want you, the problem is you. It's not. It never was. The problem is that you're still waiting to be loved with the same logic as those who hurt you. But true love isn't like that. True love doesn't diminish. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't silence. True love expands. It welcomes. It liberates. And the first true love you need to experience is with yourself, not as a speech, not as a catchphrase, but as a practice, the practice of listening to yourself, of welcoming yourself, of prioritizing yourself, of putting yourself first, and above all, of freeing yourself from the illusion that you need something that only exists in your fantasy, because the other person will not come back as you idealize them. The redeeming scene will not happen as you imagined, but there is a new scene, and it starts now, and in it, you are no longer the child who begs. You are the adult who chooses, who closes doors, who ends chapters, who says, I went as far as I could. Now I'm moving on for myself. And yes, it hurts at first. It hurts to let go. It hurts to give up hope. It hurts to see yourself alone, without the bond that gave you a false sense of love. But then ... comes lightness, comes clarity, comes peace. Because what holds you back also weighs you down. And you are ready to let go. Now that everything has fallen apart, you find yourself on the ground. And for the first time, instead of running, you stay, not because you want to suffer, but because you finally understand. Running away from yourself is what has always kept you trapped. Running away from memories, running away from tears, running away from repressed anger, running away from the truth. You spent your life seeking salvation in love, in promises, in achievements, in anything that would take you away from that emptiness that was always lurking. But emptiness is not the enemy. It is the gateway. It is what takes you inside. It is what forces you to look at what you never wanted to see. It is what forces you to stop surviving and finally start living. And living now has a different meaning. It's no longer chasing after someone. It's no longer proving anything to anyone. It's no longer trying to fix what hurt you. Living now is listening to your own soul. It's taking care of the child you once were. It's embracing every part of yourself that you judged too harshly. The sensitive, the intense, the fragile. Because that's where you lost yourself. And that's where you'll find yourself again. You don't have to be strong all the time anymore. You don't have to be in control anymore. You don't have to show that you've overcome. Because true overcoming doesn't shout. It silences. It looks at the wound and says, I'm not running away from you anymore. And that's when the magic begins. When you stop asking for permission to exist. when you stop molding yourself to fit in, when you understand that your pain is sacred because it brought you here, because it made you seek answers, because it tore away the surface so that your essence could emerge. When listened to, pain becomes a bridge, and you are crossing it. You are moving from the past that imprisoned you to the future that you are beginning to create with your own hands. Now, you are no longer a hostage to history. You are the author, and as the author, you choose. You choose who you will bond with. You choose what kind of love you will accept. You choose to stop repeating yourself. You choose to respect yourself. Choose to protect yourself. Not like someone who isolates themselves out of fear, but like someone who has finally understood their own worth. Because those who love themselves don't accept just anything. Those who love themselves don't beg. Those who love themselves don't diminish themselves. Those who love themselves choose. And the first choice is this: I will no longer abandon myself. I will no longer betray myself. I will no longer let myself be let down by anyone. And yes, it changes everything. Because when you take a stand, the world responds. People walk away. Masks fall. Arms are broken. But instead of hurting, it feels good. Because you realize you are holding on to ties that only existed because you didn't know how to say no. Because you thought you had to accept in order to be accepted. But now you accept yourself. And when you accept yourself, you no longer need anyone else to do it. The love that didn't come from outside, now comes from within. And that love is not vanity. It's not narcissism. It's healing. It's rebuilding. It's rebirth. Because your soul was never weak. It was just wounded. And wounds, when cared for, become scars. And scars are not a sign of weakness. They are a sign of someone who has faced adversity, of someone who fell and got back up, of someone who bled and survived. And you survived. All the absences, all the silences, all the rejections. You are here, whole, and now ready to be you, but not the you shaped by trauma, the authentic you, the real you, the you who feels without fear, who stands up for yourself without guilt, who loves without losing yourself, who cries without judging. Yourself, who looks in the mirror and no longer sees a mistake, you see a story of redemption, of return, of reconnection, because everything you were looking for outside, was always inside. It just needed to be heard. It just needed space. It just needed you. And now you've arrived. You've arrived for yourself. You've arrived at the right time. You've arrived with maturity, with presence, with awareness. And what comes from here on out no longer depends on what was missing. It depends on what you decide to cultivate. Because pain has already shaped you, but love will transform you. And that love begins now with a choice, a phrase, a truth. I am enough. And when you say that, something breaks, the cycle, the guilt, the prison, and something is built. Self-esteem, self-love, freedom. Because those who recognize themselves, are no longer lost. Those who embrace themselves no longer beg. Those who listen to themselves are no longer silent. You are no longer what hurt you. You are what you choose from the wound. And now, you choose to be whole. You choose to be true. You choose to be you. If this video reminded you of who you were before the pain, share it and subscribe, because now you are no longer lost.